Hey guys, here another movie for guys. Now this movie reviewing, this is another movie that has been a very long time, and I mean a very long time coming. I wanted to see this movie for a while now. I remember that I was planning on seeing this movie in theaters, and I didn't get a chance to. But anyways, now I have finally seen it, and without further ado, let's get into it. The movie I'm reviewing is Swiss Army Man. Yes, this is a movie that came out like back in June, and I wanted to watch it. And I remember it came to my theaters only for like one weekend, and I was gonna see it, but it left theaters before I could see it, so I didn't get a chance to see it. And unfortunately, it didn't come online till next week. I was gonna watch it last week, but I had too many things on with like TV and shit like that, so I didn't get a chance to review it. Either way, you guys don't care about this. I finally have seen Swiss Army Man. I was definitely really looking forward to this movie, and even though the movie seemed like it was going to be very strange, I was definitely very intrigued, to say the least. I don't know if I could say I was looking forward to it, but I was definitely intrigued by the cast and the reviews it was getting and just what I was hearing about it. I was definitely very intrigued. And after seeing Swiss Army Man, what I think of it overall, Swiss Army Man not only is a great movie, it is an absolute masterpiece, and by far is the best movie I have seen so far this year. I fucking love Swiss Army Man. This movie is just incredible. There's so much great stuff about it, and I can't wait to talk more in depth about it, but first let's get to the plot of Swiss Army Man, which this is a movie where you hear the plot and you think that sounds really dumb, but then you watch the movie and it turns out to be a lot better. But anyways, the plot of this movie, we focus on Paul Dano's character, Hank. He is this man who pretty much is kind of just done with his life. He doesn't really have much of a purpose. He feels like he doesn't have much of a motivation left, and he's pretty much on the verge of suicide, and he's about to hang himself when all of a sudden he sees this dead body in the water, and he doesn't know what this dead body is, but he slowly starts to realize that this dead body can actually come to life. Not only can it come to life, it kind of resembles a Swiss Army knife in the way that it can do multiple things, and basically he starts to create a bond with this corpse that is basically from Manny, who has forgotten pretty much all of their life, and these two start to bond and make each other feel better, and that is the best way I can describe the movie, because there's a lot more to this movie than that. But in order for me to talk about it, I have to talk about what I really have to say about this movie, starting off with the cast. Now, one of the reasons that I was so keenly interested in this movie, despite the fact that the concept I thought was kind of silly, is the cast. I thought the cast here looked very solid, and that is absolutely the case. Both Paul Dano and Daniel Radcliffe give amazing, Oscar-worthy performances, in my opinion. But let's first talk about Paul Dano, our central main character, Hank. This, to me, is the most well-realized character I have seen all year, without a doubt. Everything about Hank is just so interesting. This is a guy who, he is kind of a lowlife, and he doesn't really have much of one, and he's really, like I said, struggling to find a purpose. But he's also someone who is so full of, he's kind of average, and he's very much, he's kind of, like I said, on the verge of really not knowing what to do in his life anymore, but he's also so full of just so many pathos, and there's so much that has gone on in his life, and his life is just so interesting in general, and I really love what he had to do in this movie. He was just incredible. Every scene that he is in is just so great. I can't pick a favorite scene with his character because he's just so interesting overall. I love what they did with him. He was just such an investing character. But even better, I think, because I've really been struggling to find out which one was better, and really think about it, I think the better performance of the two is Daniel Radcliffe as Manny. The best performance I've seen this year. I mean, there is no contest. This is the best performance I have seen this year. Just the amount of effort that Daniel Radcliffe put into this role. When I say that you've never seen a character quite like this from, I think, anyone in a very long time, I mean it. Manny is one of the most unusual and different characters that I've seen. I mean, yes, not just the fact that he's a corpse and that he farts a lot and things like that, but also that, like I said, he's kind of like a child in the way where he's learning a lot more about life, and he's picking up on things very slowly, and just the character overall. This is someone who doesn't really react to things in the way you or I would, and he really dissects a lot of things in life, and I thought it was very interesting to see, and the friendship that these two eventually have is just beautiful. That's the best way to describe it. It's simply beautiful. I mean, the way that these two help out each other, and what they're able to find out about each other, and the way that what we find out about their past, past and the way they're able to move on from it, it's just beautiful. It really is. And I think they both were just so fantastic in this. By far the best chemistry I've seen from any actor so far this year in a film, and it might be the best of the year. I don't really know how we're going to get better chemistry than this, and they both were fantastic, and they're really the only performance I can talk about this movie, because the rest of the characters in this movie, I don't want to spoil anything, but the rest of the characters in this movie, when there are characters, they don't come into the third act of the movie, so I'm not really going to talk much in detail about them, because then that'd be spoiling the third act, which I am going to talk about spoilers, definitely. But these two, throughout most of the movie, it is just these two, and their interplay is just so great. They work so well together, and like I said, by far, two of the best performances I have seen this year. The best, Daniel Radcliffe being the best, and Paul Dano being one of the best, and really, I don't think there's going to be many better ones than this. But now I really want to talk about the stuff that I thought really was great in this movie, because I expected Paul Dano and Daniel Radcliffe to be great. I mean, they're both really good actors, and they're both doing some really great stuff, especially Daniel Radcliffe really is doing some incredible stuff. What really impressed me the most about this movie, though, is the directing, because the directing here is by the Daniel brothers, which, again, a lot of Daniels. I mean, I know everyone said that, but it's true. I mean, you got Paul Dano, Daniel Radcliffe, the Daniel brothers, and they directed this to absolute perfection. I mean, what they did to this movie, it's just remarkable. I mean, this is one of the best, might be actually the best directorial debut I've seen. Just the fact that this is their first movie, which it's not technically the first thing they've done. They've directed some music videos and short films, but this is the first feature-length film they've done, and what they were able to do here is just something that's so great and so beautiful, and really, I mean, props to them for creating something like this, because I don't know if you guys know this, but almost everything that the Daniels put into this movie, they dislike. I mean, they hate fart jokes, they hate montages, they hate some of the songs they play in this movie, and yet they put it all into this to create something beautiful, and honestly, they did that perfectly. This is one of those movies where I didn't know if I was going to be able to take it seriously just because of the plots, and it's very well realized. The tone is extremely well realized. It's also very funny, though. There are definitely some very funny jokes throughout this movie. Some of the funniest things I've seen all year, definitely will say that, and I thought they did a very good job with that. The movie is surprisingly a lot of fun, and I didn't expect it to be, but it actually is a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun with it, and I think the tone, like I said, is very well realized. But in order to talk about that, I really have to get into the screenplay, which is by far the best of the year. I mean, the screenplay is just so interesting. There's so much this movie has to say about keeping things concealed, and let's talk about the elephant in the room, the farting, because everyone was turned off by this movie because of the initial plot. They think, oh, it's just a farting corpse throughout the whole movie, and it's just, you know, he gets erections and things like that, and I don't really think that's what the movie's trying to say. If you really think about it, yes, there is farting in this movie, there are erections, but it's one of those movies where you're not supposed to take it at face value. You're supposed to really think about what it means, and really, the farting and the erections in this movie really are symbolisms for things that we keep inside and things that we don't want other people to see, and that's when the movie gets more in depth and talks about things like, you know, emotions or something that you're feeling. I mean, compare that to something that you're feeling inside. That's really what this movie is trying to say. I mean, obviously, yes, keeping farts to yourself is a polite thing to do, but just like we keep emotions inside, we keep that inside as well, and it really makes you look at these things that you haven't really seen, and you're kind of like, wow, I actually see that way differently now. I mean, there are not a lot of movies that do that, but this movie did that very, very well. I mean, it made me look at something as ridiculous as a fart joke, and really made me think, you know what, I really look at that differently, and they really did just such a great job with that. But something they did even better than just that is really getting into these two characters' lives, because they both have such interesting lives. They're both such well-realized and developed characters, and like I said, the way that they think and feel about life is not the same way that you or I would. Well, you know, for Paul Dano, yes, but Manny especially, there is a lot that he has to say about life that we don't really fully understand, and any scene where these two are in front of a campfire is just phenomenal. I mean, you could just pick any of those scenes and classify as the best scene of the year, because they're all fantastic, they're all so interesting, and this is really when they get to start to learn a lot more about each other, and especially when there's another whole plot element in the movie that I'm not going to spoil, but when Paul Dano starts to create remnants of Manny's life, that's really when the movie gets really great, and I really think they did a great job with that. And like I said, the movie in general is very fun, and it is funny, but this is one of those movies where you look at a joke and you're laughing, but at the same time, then Manny will say something, and you're thinking, am I supposed to be laughing? And this isn't a problem. This is honestly a good thing for the movie, because it's part of what the movie's trying to say. It's taking things that we laugh at and really makes you kind of look at it and look at the other person and say, does the other person in the room really find this as funny, or do they think I'm just laughing at them, or do they just find it rude and weird? You know, how do they really think about it? And it's really interesting the way the movie did that. I mean, this is definitely a movie where you're gonna watch it and it may honestly make you think differently about certain things in life. And I know it sounds ridiculous for a movie about a farting corpse who gets erections and jet skis through said erections, but I thought it was really cool the way they did that. I just thought it was very investing, and the whole movie in general is just so interesting. I could not take my eyes off the screen in this movie. I mean, the movie is just so investing. You get so into the plot, and the other thing I love is the visuals in this movie. The cinematography is so good. I mean, most of this movie, you are in the woods throughout most of this movie, but you don't feel like you're watching a movie, honestly. You kind of feel like you're right beside them in the woods, and it's mainly because of how intimate of a movie this really is. And when I say this movie's intimate, it's fucking intimate. I mean, you really feel like you're right beside them, listening to what's going on. Almost like you could be in these woods with Paul Dano. You could be the one talking him out of what's going on, but you can't really say or do anything. You can't help but really observe what's going on. You know when you see a certain situation go on and you don't really know what to say, but you just can't help but watch? That is the best way to describe, this movie in general. You know, in terms of the cinematography, it is just amazing to look at. The forest, just everything about it. The woods kind of becomes its own character in the movie, and I think they did an incredible job with that. I really did love everything about the cinematography. The score in this movie also is absolutely fantastic. The Daniels actually, I believe, wrote all of the music. Now, they didn't write all the music. Some of the music, like Cotton Eye Joe and Jurassic Park, that's in the movie, obviously those are original music compositions, but what they did is most of the music in this movie, they made into their own music, and that is very impressive. This is one of the best soundtracks I have heard in such a long time, and people say that, you know, we hear so many of the same songs in movies and things like that, and this movie honestly did a very good job of doing something better than that. I think they really put their all into it, and it just makes the movie feel more intimate and smaller, and that's something that this movie needs to feel. It never feels like this big budget blockbuster, because that's not at all what this movie is. And the editing. This movie is 95 minutes long. I'm not gonna lie, it felt like half an hour. I'm not gonna lie to you guys. This movie flew by for me. I was into it the whole time. I don't know how this movie went by as fast as it did. This movie, we were 8 minutes in. I thought we were 4 minutes in. That's how fast this movie goes. And this is a movie where if you really can appreciate, you know, this kind of movie, this movie is going to go very fast, and you're definitely going to be completely riveted almost the entire time. But now, guys, comes the stuff that I definitely do want to talk about, which, of course, are the spoilers, which, guys, if you plan on seeing this movie, do not watch the rest of this review. I mean, I understand, really, guys. I understand if you're turned off by this movie, but I really mean that you are not going to get the emotional impact or feel the way you do by these characters if you know what I'm going to say about this movie going into it. I just really is something that should be left hidden. Even if you're just a little bit intrigued, I recommend you see it. I mean, if you guys didn't like it, that's fine. I totally understand if you don't like it. It's very different. It's not for the average moviegoer. I totally understand that. But if you are interested, definitely do not watch this review, because I'm going to spoil a ton of shit, mainly regarding a plot point that I just didn't really want to talk about, and I feel is best left hidden. But let's just get right into it. So, first of all, as you guys know, and again, hoping that you guys aren't watching the rest of the review, I left Mary Elizabeth Winstead's performance and her character annexed in the duration of this review. And that's mainly because that while she is billed as the third main character in this movie, most of this movie, it's just Manny and Hank, you know, interacting and trying to find out ways about each other, but she might as well be the third character in this movie, because, yeah, she's only in one scene physically, but she is in a very large point in this movie, and she definitely is a big part of this movie, and I really love what they do with their character of Sarah. Sarah is this girl that Hank always saw on a bus, and every day you could tell he liked her, but he just didn't have the courage and the confidence to talk to her, and that, honestly, believe it or not, is very relatable. There have been many times where I've liked a girl and I haven't had I haven't really talked to them as much as I've wanted to because I worry, am I good enough for her? And really thinking about, what Hank is saying with him thinking that he wasn't good enough for her and him thinking that he doesn't deserve love, again, kind of is relatable. Now, I wasn't as depressed or in much of a rut as Hank was, but I definitely was, it definitely did concern me, but I think it was very well done the way they handled that. And basically, Hank, we see that on his phone, he has these pictures of Sarah, and the way the phone kind of becomes its own character, I thought was very interesting, but basically, Hank kind of starts to, fabricate this lie for Manny that this was Manny's life, and that Manny was with Sarah, and that Manny kind of starts to fall in love with her. Even if he didn't know her, he wants to fall in love with her, and he becomes obsessed with the idea of sex. And I absolutely loved the way they did this, because when you have a young kid, like I said, Manny's very much like a young kid. When someone finds out about sex, they want to know everything there is to know about it. They want to know the ins and outs, they want to know all positions, everything. They want to know everything there is to know about sex. I remember when I first discovered it, I became obsessed with it, and I think everyone really becomes as obsessed as Manny does in that scene. Obviously not as weird as he does, but they're just as interested. And even if he doesn't know Sarah, he feels that his purpose is to go find her, that this is the girl he's meant to be with. And basically, realizing that this was, in fact, Hank's girl and not Manny's girl, when Hank is pretending to be Sarah and is acting out like her, responding like she would, saying things in the way he knew she would, you could tell this was kind of cathartic for him, because this is what he wanted to say to her. This is how he wished she would react. He doesn't know if she'd really react this way, but he wishes she'd react this way. And it honestly is a really great moment of very subtle catharsis, and I really do love the way that was done overall. But then, of course, we get to the point where Manny, like I said, he starts to fall in love with her, and that becomes one of the biggest plot points of the movie. And something I didn't talk about, in the review, because I didn't want to really talk about this, is what the movie really has to say about sex and porn and things like that. Even things like that, those are things we keep inside. And the way the movie talks about masturbation and sex, and that those are things that we don't want to talk about with other people about, is very interesting, because nowadays you do talk to a lot of people about that stuff. But I think what Hank is really trying to say is that's not the first thing you ever talk about. That's something that most times you talk to someone about it and they'll say, oh, too much information or something like that. Those are very sensitive, or, very boundaries based. So, respect people's boundaries, but you can tell that Manny, like I said, he doesn't really look at it that way. And the way that he questioned that stuff, I thought was just really interesting, and I really did love that. But then, of course, comes the point where Manny starts to realize that this was all fabricated, that this was just something that Hank came up with to make him feel good about himself, and he starts to feel the emotion of crying. And I'm not going to lie, when Manny was crying, I was crying. And that scene with the bear, I had no idea what was going to happen in that scene. I mean, I thought that Hank could have possibly gotten eaten by the bear. I honestly just had no idea. That scene was so well done, with him tripping up and having those visions. I absolutely loved. But then we get to the scene where we see that Manny somehow has taken him to Sarah's house, and he goes to see Sarah's daughter, Chrissy, and Chrissy is kind of freaked out by Manny. And that, I thought, was kind of, in many ways, this movie, I didn't really say this, but in many ways this is kind of an obscure version of Frankenstein, in the way that Manny feels he's a monster and everyone looks at him that way. Yeah, it's true. I mean, we get creeped out by dead bodies, and Manny is a perfect example of that. He feels that he's just a monster, that everyone freaks out when they see him, but Hank doesn't, because Manny's the only person that is kind of like Hank, and Hank feels that Manny kind of gives him, something to feel good about, and I really did love it overall. And again, like I said, it's weird to look at, but if you really think about this movie, in many ways, is a very obscure, subtle, just really strange version of Frankenstein. Again, not at all the same kind of movie, but in many ways it is, and I thought that was really cool. But then we see Sarah, and Sarah generally does care for Hank. I don't know if she likes him a romantic way, but she definitely does care for him. I think she wants to be friends with him. You know, she sees that he likes her, and she asks him if he's okay. And then he starts to go on about the dead body and everything that's going on there. No one initially believes him, obviously, because it just sounds absurd. But there's also that one scene that I don't know if a lot of people will notice, where there's that guy, that police chief, and he goes to Hank and he says, "I think I know you." And basically, the Daniels have actually confirmed that that was the guy who called Hank Hanky Wanky. That was the guy that did that. They were gonna have more scenes with him, but just that little scene, even though there's not a lot to it, it just shows that Hank is someone who wasn't really beloved by a lot of people. And when they say that this is a corpse that no one really cared about, they actually mean it. I really saw Manny as someone who didn't really have much of a purpose. And Manny had said in that scene, you know, I wish I was dead. And then he's kind of dead there. I thought it was very interesting. But then Hank, you know, he finally lets out everything about Manny. Everyone initially thinks he's crazy. But then he releases the fart. And like I said, the fart is supposed to be a symbolism of him getting out everything. You know, he has nothing to hide anymore. Now that he's told everyone his secret, he doesn't have anything to hide. They now know what he's talking about. And, Hank, you know, Manny does in fact come alive. There are all these like exploding farts and things like that, and we see that he goes into the water. Everyone's seeing what was going on. He gestures to Hank, and then the movie ends. And I thought they were gonna do this really weird twist where Hank and Manny were actually the same person. Now we definitely do know that Hank made up this entire forest. Was basically, he was in there the whole time, like right near Sarah's house. He was there. We don't know why, but he was there. And I know some people might see that as a problem, that they didn't really explain. I really think that was something we needed to know. But as far as Hank and Manny being the same person, I mean, the movie doesn't really tell you, and I was perfectly fine with that. We don't really need to know if Hank and Manny are the same person or not. You know, is this really a man who was suicidal and, you know, thought that he had no purpose, and then he finds a purpose through an unlikely friend? Or is this a man on the verge of insanity who has found a way to cope with the illness that he has, and now he's starting to feel good about himself, but he still is just as crazy? I don't really know. But either way, I still felt the same way I did about it. And it is, in fact, one of those endings where if you guys have anything to say about it and you guys want to message me about it, I'd love to hear about it, because it's one of those endings where I really do feel I'll get something different out of it every time I watch it, and I definitely could see that happening. So if you guys have anything to say, just private message me. If you want to message me in the comments, just put the spoiler tag. But either way, I thought by far was probably one of the best endings I've seen this year. I know a lot of people are not a fan of it. I am a huge fan of the ending. I love the way the ending is done. Probably the best ending I've seen this year. Absolutely love it. And again, just really shows how great this movie is when it comes to symbolism and moving on and change things like that. This movie just really got that done perfectly. Year. I absolutely love it. It is the best film I have seen this year, and without a doubt, guys, if you guys can't tell, I am definitely going to give Swiss Army Man a 5 out of 5 or an A+. When I say this movie is truly something remarkable, I truly mean it. There have been a lot of movies that I may have overhyped, and maybe I thought differently about, and maybe I watched it again. I'm like, that wasn't that great. I don't know why I said it was that great. This is not that movie. This is one of, if not, it is one of the best movies of this decade, without a doubt. I mean, if you guys want to talk about different movies, this is a movie. A lot of people now, they talk about, you want something original, they don't get to see original movies. This movie, in fact, is about as original as it gets, and I encourage all of you to check it out. Like I said, even if you're just a little bit interested, check it out. It's not for everyone, but if you enjoy movies that have great stories and you appreciate the story it's telling, you will get immediately invested, and once you get immediately invested, hopefully the movie will keep you just invested throughout it like it did with me, and hopefully by the end, you will feel differently about life, because I'm not lying when it said it truly did make me feel different about life, and hopefully you guys get the same impact that I did. But overall, guys, my review, Swiss Army Man. Let me know what you guys thought of this movie overall. Love to hear your thoughts on it. Sorry this review is very long. I had a lot to say about this movie. Like I said, it very much affected me. And when a movie affects you, you have a lot to say about it. And, you know, you should keep a conversation going. But that's my review. Hope you guys enjoy it. Love to hear your thoughts about this movie overall. And I will see you guys in my next video, which will be for, I think, Quarry, because I have 2 episodes to review for that. And I will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.